What's up, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Scouting Defense, part of the 3 yards per carry and part of the 5 Reasons Sports Podcast Network. I'm your co-host, Hussam Patel, and joining me are my other co-hosts, Coach and Eric. Gentlemen, how are we doing tonight?
Doing really well tonight. Obviously, pretty special episode, so I'm excited for it. Really gonna be a lot of fun today. Looking forward to it. How you guys doing?
Yeah, this is a guest that I've been looking forward to for a while, trying to get on here. As a football fan, for me, born in the mid '80s, most Dolphins fans are going to associate with Dan Marino when talking about NFL idols in the '90s. For me, a lifelong offensive lineman, obviously still a huge Marino fan, but I probably had more of a connection with the guys in the trenches than most other people. So today's guest was the ninth overall pick in the 1990 NFL draft and protected Dan Marino's blind side for 11 of his 13 years in the NFL. He was among the 25 semifinalists for the Pro Football Hall of Fame in 2025, and he deserves to get his spot in there. I'd like to welcome to the show Dolphins legend, Richmond Webb.
Gentlemen, how y'all doing?
Doing well. Really appreciate you coming on today. We're just going to kind of go around the horn here, ask you some questions, and get your input on just football overall, and also the 2025 version of the Dolphins that we have here.
Sounds good. I know a little bit about that subject. I don't know much, but that we can get it started. So yeah, that sounds good to me.
All right, so I'll get us started here. So Richmond, as someone who's played the position at the highest level, your perspective really matters to all of us. What do you think that fans overlook or misunderstand about the role of offensive linemen in the NFL and to their football teams?
Yeah, I think the thing that, some fans understand it, but most don't. Offensive line, defensive line is typically not a glory position, and at least defensive line, sometimes they're a little bit more recognizable because, they get sacks or, the tackles and that. Typically, as an offensive lineman, the only time you get your name called is if it's a penalty or you give up a sack or whatever like that. But I tell people all the time that, the wide receivers, all those guys, those are important. But everything starts up front. Everything starts in the trenches. And if you can control the line of scrimmage, either with your offense or defensive line, it gives you so much more a greater chance of coming out with a victory in this and that. So that's the first thing that I'd let them know. But yeah, typically it's not a glory position, and you can tell when you go to the pro shops. Doesn't matter what team it is. It's normally the wide receivers, the quarterbacks, the more popular guys, and I don't have an issue with that, but that's just the way it is. And, I've had some really great teammates, and they play a vital, important part as well. We don't do everything, but typically it does start in the trenches. I tell people, and I firmly believe that.
Week to week in the NFL, Richmond, there's adjustments made based on the type of defense, the type of front, and who you're playing as well. What was the biggest weekly adjustment you made facing different fronts, specifically in the AFC East during the 90s? And were there any players or a specific front that gave you guys real problems?
Well, I think, even with the front, I think the thing you got to look at is not only the front, but the personnel. And I think in the early 90s, most teams played 4 down linemen, 3 linebackers. But at times you would get a team like Pittsburgh, I think New England, back when Andre Tippett and those guys they would play 4 linebackers and 3. So it was more of an odd front. And so your responsibilities changed. And if you caught one of those games where you were like, 4 down linemen, so you kind of know in the end you get a team that plays a totally different scheme or front, you've got to account, because sometimes depending on whether it was a weak side linebacker or strong side linebacker, we would have responsibilities of how we were going to treat him. And a lot of times they would reduce down to make a look of 3-man, like a 4-man. The defensive tackle would slide down over the guard, and then you'd have the outside linebacker out there. So those were some of the things that you had to deal with. And if you played Tampa Bay, I remember Tampa Bay, and I think it was Chicago. A lot of time they would play the 4-man, but they would play. Buddy Ryan came up with that famous 46 defense, where sometimes the linebacker would be inside, and the when I tell you the defensive end was in a wide 9, he was in a wide 9. So that was something you typically didn't see week in, week out, and it makes it tougher to prepare because it's not what you see normally, and you don't see it that often. But when you see it, you still got to understand it, block it the correct way, because if you get confused, running back can get blowed up, quarterback can get hit, this and that. And so those are some of the things that would kind of, you'd have to adjust and make those adjustments week in and week out.
Yeah, that's a awesome answer. And kind of to piggyback off of that. So, you and Keith Sims, you guys came into the league together and you locked down the left side of the Dolphins line for almost a decade. And I wanted to get, your thoughts on how important was that continuity to the success for you guys, and what made your partnership work so well, both, on and off the field?
Yeah. That was the best thing that happened to me was, I got drafted and Keith got drafted. We got drafted the same year, came in together, and then, went through preseason. And we got such a ton of reps. And I think Coach Shula knew that, at the time we didn't know, but we were getting so many reps, and it was a couple of guys, veterans that were holding out. So since we were starting those games, we thought we would come out when the starters came out in preseason. They was like, no, y'all guys got to stay in there. And at first we thought it was punishment. At least I did. I'll speak for myself. But really, Coach Shula was getting us ready, getting us as many reps as possible before we could be ready for opening day. But I think the thing that was special about me and Keith is we really communicated very well from the start that we got there. And then it would be times that once we played together, we could look at each other without saying anything, because defensive linemen pick up on certain offensive terminology that you use in the line. And sometimes we might just say yeah or no, and they don't know what that means, but we did. But we were that much in tune, and we could just go out and react rather than think, is he going to help me, or do we got to cut this guy off? We knew it, and once you know it like that, you just go out and react. And he was such a tremendous player. He made my job easy, and along with the communication, I think that was the key to why we had so much success and had it early.
Now, you play with Dan Marino, who had a lightning quick release, and now with Tua as the quarterback for the Dolphins, he's got a quick release and he throws the ball, the fastest in terms of time in the NFL. When you think back to playing with Dan and now you see Tua play, how does that quick release impact the way offensive line pass protect?
Well, it depends on different plays. Some plays take a little bit more time to develop. You can really get it out on first and second down if you're clicking. I think, their offense is a little bit different than what we did. They probably use a lot more motion that we did, back then. But of course, the game has changed, this and that. But I think what it shows is if you have a quarterback, it's almost like having a computer with a really high processing speed. So it doesn't take him long. Read the defense, figure out what they're doing, and get the ball out. And anytime you can do that, you keep the chains moving, or you keep the first down chains moving. But it also frustrates the defense because it's harder for them to get off the field. So if you can sustain drives, this and that, you typically wear defense is down, and gives you a better chance to win the game because you control the time of possession, you dominate the clock. And typically you do that with the running game, but we threw it a lot, and sometimes we would score quick, this and that, but that's just part of it. But when you got a quarterback that gets it out that quick, this and that, it just shows he's a really high intelligent individual, and he processes stuff extremely fast. He makes a decision, no hesitation. He knows where he want to go with the football, and he gets it out. And I think that's two traits that both of those quarterbacks have.
All right, let's Patrick Paul, right? He has that massive frame, just loads of raw potential.
Yeah.
Obviously you're somebody that knows how to anchor down the left side and in Miami. What do you see in his game that reminds you of yourself in your early years? And what do you think that he needs to do to, grow and become that long-term answer at left tackle that we need?
Yeah, I think the thing that I see with Patrick Paul is, I actually got to announce him not in 2024, the draft pick for the Dolphins. I was in Detroit for that. And, just looking at his highlights and some of his tape, he has the frame for a prototype left tackle. He's probably an inch, maybe inch and a half taller than me. A little bit bigger than I was when I came in the league. But the times I've seen him play, extremely aggressive, doesn't mind mixing it up, get in there. And I love to see that in a young offensive lineman. So he has all the tools. I think the thing he needs is just experience and the reps. The other thing is playing behind a guy like Teron Armstead last year. He got to soak up so much knowledge from one of the best in the game and learn that rather than just get thrown into the fire where they didn't just necessarily need him right away. I think if they did, he could have stepped up to the plate. But when you get to learn from one of the best and pick their brain, I think it's going to really help his career and help him take off as fast. And then, also Austin Jackson on the other side. And, he got nicked up a little bit last year, but the year before that, I thought he had a Pro Bowl year. And so I was really extremely happy with the way our tackles played in, was it 23? Because, he got hurt a little bit. But, just communicate and with the guy you playing next to and this and that, I think he's going to be fine. So I'm looking forward for a big year out of Patrick Paul.
On the same topic of Patrick Paul, I got a chance to talk with him a couple times in the media presser. As physically imposing as he is, inside personality, he's a big softy, very funny guy, amazing character guy, and very smart too, coming from his background, coming from what he wants to do for life after football. If there was one advice on the mental game side of things you could give to Patrick Paul, what would you tell him?
Well, from what you're saying, I think he has a lot figured out. Most guys don't come into the league. Like you said, he's very smart and then already knows what he wants to do life after football. So I think he's a step ahead of the curve. Hadn't met him personally, but, hearing stuff like that. And then, most of the guys are pretty nice guys off the field, except unless they're putting their helmet on and snapping up their chin strap, that's a different thing. So you met him in friendly terms, which was a good thing. But if you was a defensive lineman, I guarantee you it wouldn't have went like that. But I'm always happy to see that guys have figured out not only what they want to do. I think he wants to be successful. I think the way he works and the way I've seen him compete, I know he wants to be one of the best in the game, and that's a huge part of it. So he's just got to put the work in, and then to hear that he already kind of knows what he wants to do after football, that's tremendous. So I'm definitely excited to hear that and happy about that. But I'm not rushing him. He's got a long time. We can use him for a long time before he gets to his next career move.
Yeah, I think he was just talking about that in a media availability recently that has the goal of being what is the prince of or something like that wherever he I'm going to butcher this, right? His native country, the king or whatever, that's his goals. But he said that's a decade from now that he's trying to play football now, be focused on that. So moving on from Patrick Paul, so Jonah Savaiinaea, right? Second round pick this year. He's expected to come in and compete for a starting job from day one, which is something that you experienced as a rookie back in 1990. From your perspective, what are the biggest challenges that a young offensive lineman faces when he's stepping into the NFL and being asked to contribute immediately coming out of college?
Yeah, I think the thing, and it might be more complex with this offensive system than what we had back when I was playing with all the motion and stuff. I hadn't studied their playbooks, but I heard Tua give an example of calling a play, and I was like, you only got 25 seconds in the clock before you got to get to the line and snap the ball. And I was like, as long as that works for y'all, cool. But even when Dan would call plays, we just needed a little snippet. We didn't need all the motion and all that. So you learn to tune into that. Oh yeah, what was the question? I lost.
Just the challenges that Savaiinaea is going to have.
Yeah. So that's one thing, is learn the playbook. But the good thing is, which I always think is key, is getting signed early and getting into camp, because then you start getting the reps in mini camp, quarterback school. The more for me you get, if you have a long holdout, it's not that you can't play, it's just that you don't know the terminology or the system. And so you're learning the system when everybody else is ahead of it. So now they can't put you out there because you're thinking, instead of, okay, now I've kind of figured it out, I can just go out and react, where that little bit of hesitation will get you beat, this and that. But watching him, he could even, I know they're going to play him at guard, but I think he played some tackle or guard at Arizona. So he's very versatile. But what I like about him and what the Dolphins did is they focused on the trenches with their early picks. And I think that's something that caused us to lose some games last year, is not being able to run in between the tackles. We could run outside, but once the defense knows that, they can counter you're only one-dimensional or whatever, it's a little bit easier to defend. But if we can run in between the tackles and outside, throw the football, it gives them another something to worry about. So I think he will be fine, but those are the things that I like to see. Get the guys signed early, get them in the camp, and get them with the terminology, the plays, and this and that. And you can start working with the guys that possibly, if you're going to be a starter, you start getting reps with them and you kind of get a feel for each other and communication.
Yeah, hi. Just came in from
What's up,
Hassan went ahead and tagged me in. So you talked earlier a little bit about, kind of the communication that you had with Keith on that left side of the line, and with Savaiinaea coming in and potentially having, a shot at starting along the offensive line. It might be the right side, it might be the left side with Patrick Paul. Those two guys would be very young on that left side. I can imagine a lot of the challenges that might come with that, but was there anything with you and Keith that you found as like a benefit, that you guys were both kind of rookies starting next to each other, as opposed to maybe, next to a veteran player?
Yeah, I think the thing was, we never really felt intimidated because we were both rookies. And at times, I'm sure we messed up, but, we had a tremendous line coach, John Sandusky. And if we made a mistake, you're going to get chewed out when you get to the sideline, but it's going to get corrected. And the thing with me and Keith was, once we kind of got it, we got it. So it wasn't always like he corrected that and then we go back out 2 more series and continue to make the same mistake. So when you pick it up like that, it helps not only you, but it helps the offense, and everybody benefits from that. So I think that's the thing. Like I said, getting in camp, getting early, but if it's 2 rookies, you don't worry about that. And even as I got older and I would play, so a guy went down at the guard position or whatever, the first thing I do, I pull him, I say, look here, as long as what we're doing, we're going to do it the same. I said, we got to communicate. I said, if we mess up, don't worry about it. I'll take the heat. Don't you worry about it. I said, cause I got a little bit more grace than you. I just need you to trust, to communicate with me. So I had to get that, because, you being a young player and, you might not be as drafted as high. You'd be like, man, if everything's screwed up, they're going to get on me and this and that. And normally that would work out. And I would just tell them, that was one less thing I had to worry about. I say, just communicate. I say, if we screw it up, don't worry about it. We get to the sideline, I'll take the heat for it. Don't worry about it. And I was a man of my word. So if somebody know they can trust you, even though they know you're not going to just throw them up under the bus and say, man, I told Eric 3 times and he still went the wrong way. I'm not going to do you like that. So I'll be like, no, that's my bad, coach. Yeah, I should have did this and that. And he might know it's not my spot, but at least it keeps the pressure off. And I need that guy to be able to focus and continue to play, because if you go in the tank or you get to thinking too much, it's going to be a bad thing for the whole team. So I didn't have an issue doing that.
There's a lot of raw talent with Jonah and Patrick Paul, but technique and mental processing is what separates from the good OL to the great offensive lineman in this league. What were some drills or mental reps that helped you sharpen your game early in your career that both Jonah and Patrick can do during this offseason training camp and at the beginning of the season?
Yeah, I think for me, and well, probably for Keith too, but I'll just speak for me. When I came out, I went to Texas A&M, and we were heavily run team, ran the option, this and that. So go from that to the Miami Dolphins, where I really didn't use a lot of 2-point stance in college, this and that. So I had to learn that. But the good thing with those young guys is, just like me, I had John Sandusky. They have a great line coach down there that even helped develop Austin Jackson, this and that. So he knows what they possibly can work on, to fine tune, to polish him up. And this is the time you get that done before the season, the quarterback schools, this and that. The unfortunate thing about the way they do training camp now, they practice once a day. Well, we practice twice a day, so we got a lot more reps. Even if we messed up in the morning, you go back out there. Now, it was probably more wear and tear on the body, but reps is how you get better, and they just don't hit as much. It's what it is now. So it's got to be more mental and stuff like that, because they just don't do a lot of pad work and stuff like that. But I think they got enough experience to where they can grasp that, but the stuff they need to polish on, coach will get with them and get that polished up. And you normally have that fixed in preseason. They should be ready to go.
Yeah. So changing gears a little bit here, you've mentioned a couple of times here about going to college at Texas A&M. As a former offensive lineman, I got to imagine that you've always had an appreciation for the run game, right? And one of the Dolphins' rising stars right now is Devon Achane, also an Aggie. What have you seen in his game so far? And do you think he's just scratching the surface of what he can become in this league?
Yeah, the thing with Achane, it's Achane. Sometimes I want to say Achane, but it's Achane. And I remember watching him at Texas A&M, and he was like world-class sprinter. So a lot of times he wouldn't go through spring football. He would be competing in track, and so he would get in track shape, lose weight, and then have to eventually put it back on. Well, now he doesn't have to transition like that. But even when he was at Texas A&M, I was always amazed at his size, how he was able to not just use his speed and run outside. He could run between the tackles, and he was effective. And I think him and Wright, they just complement each other. So if we fix the interior part of the offensive line, I'm looking for both of those guys to have really big years and really complement each other. And their styles are a little bit different, but it keeps the defense off kilter, off balance. And once you get that rhythm going, man, we can really have something special. So I think some of the things have hindered the Dolphins is not having enough depth in the offensive line and guys getting injured, with the starters and stuff. But with Jonah and those young guys coming in, if we keep those guys healthy and get them going, I think Achane and Wright are going to benefit from it. So, yeah, I think we're going to be in good hands. I'm looking forward to it.
Awesome.
Yeah, I mean, in looking at that, it's definitely a bit of a transitional year along the offensive line. You've got projected to have up to 3 new starters along the line. I mean, you came in blocking for Dan Marino, but you mentioned you and Keith both kind of coming in as rookies. You didn't really feel you weren't intimidated. How did that work? Because I gotta imagine number 9 overall pick, you're blocking for Dan Marino in Miami. I mean, if that's not pressure, I really don't know what is. How did you handle that in your first year out the gate?
Well, that's a different type of pressure. The pressure I was talking about, just being 2 rookies. Let me clean that up, because I was just talking about being two rookies playing. So he's a rookie. I'm a rookie. If we screw up, that's different. But coming into Miami, when I came into Miami, it was Don Shula and Dan Marino. And both of them were already Hall of Fame worthy people. Nobody had to tell me that. And so, as a first rounder coming in, the good thing is you're able to go out, perform and produce and meet expectations of what they expect. And not only what they expect, but what the fan base expects. And a lot of times I've seen, took me a while just from, learning each year, and it's not, but if you could be a really good player, but if you have a long holdout and this and that, you miss most of your training camp and stuff as a first rounder, you're not going to play much. And then you're going to be considered a bust. It's not that you're a bust. It's just your contract, you didn't get that worked out. And so I kind of I said, okay, I understand that part. But, for me, I think the pressure was we're blocking for Dan Marino. And for me, it was always, it's either feast or famine. And I said, I don't want to be remembered as the guy that gets this guy hurt. You know what I'm saying? So that was my motivation. I used that to, try to do the best I possibly could because he was already a legend. I mean, you got a statue outside the stadium now, but it's just like, that's not the way you want to be remembered. And I just used that to help keep my focus, work ethic, and this and that, because that wouldn't be a good thing. And this and that. But, the other positive thing was playing with a guy like Dan Marino and how competitive he was. And you saw how he worked, how he prepared in practice, games, the film. You saw everything. So we didn't have to reinvent the wheel. We just had to duplicate what they were doing. And I think that's why we had success.
We had a rookie offensive lineman on this show, Jackson Slater. He was picked in the 5th round to the Tennessee Titans this year. And he spoke some of the nuances he saw in game and even on film, specifically from the defense. Obviously, you're concerned about the front 4, front 5. But he was talking to Coach Eric and I about how he was seeing the depth of the safeties, their footwork, and even their eyes on the 3rd level in today's NFL. Were there certain things you saw back then from the 2nd and 3rd level that you don't see now in the NFL?
No, I think the biggest thing I saw, or the first thing I figured out about the NFL versus college, the game is definitely faster. I can remember playing at A&M. I think we played 10, 11 a game. So we knew 3 or 4 of them was going to be really tough games. 3 or 4 of them, you knew you were just going to win right out. And then a couple of them, if you didn't show up to play, you could get, but you kind of had that. In the NFL, it's not that. You can get beat any week, regardless of a team. If they show up to play, you're going to have hell on your hands. So I can just remember we'd be blocking certain things. You see the hole open up, and next thing you know, before the back got there, the hole closes right back up. It's just like, yeah, it was open, but it's closed. So it just shows the margin of error is so tight that it's a totally different game, and you have to adjust to the speed of the game. But you've got, and I talked about it a little bit, but even for a running back, you've got to be able to process that. Do I continue to press it onside, or do I cut back? Because a lot of times it looked like it's a cutback, and you cut back and you cutting right back, and that safety is filling that hole, and you'd be like, oh. So yeah, it's a learning experience, but I think everything is just it's faster, and they disguise it better, because most of the time we will watch the tight copy, just between the guys in the box, and then we would watch the wide copy where you can see everybody, but we would kind of speed through that because we didn't really need to see the routes. But you would see sometime right before the snap of the ball, like they say they're showing cover 2, and snap of the ball, they might roll to cover 3 or another thing. And it's like, for a quarterback and for a receiver, you can say, okay, yes, it's cover 2, but it could change instantly. And that means you got to okay, against this, I might run this route, but against another defense, I got to run this route. So it just shows you that they don't just show you, they show you one look and then give you another one, but you got to be able to process it like that and change it if they change it. It's a much faster game.
Yeah. Now, Coach in Richmond, this is a follow-up to this question. Do you feel like it's important for offensive linemen to see what's happening on the second and third level nowadays?
It depends on the play. The first thing I do is your responsibility, but a lot of times, say we have a pass play, and a lot of times, especially, it's not as tough at home. But if you're on the road where you can't hear and this and that, and a lot of times, say that safety walks up in the A gap and say the back is responsible for him. A lot of time, we'll have to squeeze down, and he might have to go cut the guy on the end of the line, but you got to be aware. I can't just sit there and look at the defensive end and say, okay, I got this guy. I got to be aware of my, my surroundings and what's going on. So, it's just in that I just have to know that in the event the guys walk up in a gap and we might have to squeeze it down and this and that. And that's where, even if I don't see it, normally Keith would be, hey, this and that, alerting me saying, we need to squeeze down. So that's why communication is so important, because most of the time you might see it, but you might not. And but anytime somebody alerts you, kind of like, okay, I see it now, and we're on the same page.
Yeah, and that makes perfect sense from the passing game perspective. And as you mentioned with the running game and all the motions that are involved with this offense, I think you see some of that same stuff, especially with the outside zone. You've got the combo blocks up to the second level, and a safety walking up in the box late, may not have been part of those combination calls originally, but once that motion goes and that safety rolls up, then suddenly he's in a position where you kind of need to account for him. And I think that's really where the communication that you talked about with Keith, where it's like, you've seen that on film, you see him walking up, and it's just like, the one word that you were talking about, the yep, and we're both on the same page, and everybody's rolling in the same direction. So you played under, Don Shula. You mentioned him before. Obviously, one of the most disciplined and legendary coaches in NFL history. And then these days, Mike McDaniel, very different energy there with him. More laid back, more analytical, more player friendly, I guess you would say. How do you think that you, as a player, would have responded to Mike McDaniel's coaching style? And how do you see it comparing to what you experienced under Coach Shula?
Yeah, I think I would have responded because I've always respected the position of coach, player, and it didn't matter whether I was a first rounder or one of the top guys getting played in at my position in the league. I've always respected the position, and I never disrespected my coaches. I could talk to them, this and that, and so I can function under anybody, but the difference is, you're right, he's not Coach Shula. And I can remember one game I messed up. I don't know if it was a penalty or what, and I could hear him from the sideline, and I would not look over to the sideline because I could hear him screaming at me. And then when I came off the field, if he was here, I started angling down there, but he came down anyway. I was like, oh, man, it was just – but the thing, Shula was tough, but once you figured him out, he truly cared for his players. And I think once you figured that out, he was on you. But I think the thing that I realized from Coach Shula was every mistake can cause you to lose the game, because most games are 3 points or less and this and that. And so if you don't make mental mistakes, if you don't make penalties, this and that, to, instead of being 1st and 10, you won't be 1st and 20. He was a stickler on that. And so it made us just a lot more alert and this and that, and kept us out of a lot of bad positions. And so we understood that. But he was a player. He truly cared, loved his players, this and that. But if you messed up, he was going to get on you. But it was out of love. It wasn't like he just hated you or nothing. And once you figure that out, you'll play for a guy like that. So, but I can function under anybody, as long as what we're doing, we're going to win, this and that. And, I like from not only me, but I like for all players to, if you're the player, that's the coach, respect the coach, and let's get this thing done.
And that kind of leads into my kind of a follow-up question to that, because we've heard them talking about culture change here with the team this year, and we've seen some changing in the personnel, that is supposedly leaning towards that. How important is it for the players to really buy into that? I imagine when you have a coach like Coach Shula, right, that's a little more in your face, might challenge those players a little more. If you've got a guy like McDaniel that may not get up there and challenge a prominent player that's not happy with him, like how important is it for your leaders to be able to step up and don't want to necessarily say player-led team, but they have to have their role in it, right?
Yeah, they have to have a role. And the thing I remember is I played for Jimmy Johnson as well, and I remember when he first came in, I kind of laughed, but it was true. He said, I don't treat everybody the same. He said, if you're a guy that's up here, one of the top, he said, you'll get a little bit more grace than somebody that's, lower on the totem pole and this and that. And so even though you might get a little bit more grace, he was pretty much consistent. And I think that's the thing is players look for is consistency. If you mess up, you messed up, get on that guy. He might not get on that guy's rough bit. You still got to correct the mistakes. And I think players look for consistency. And as long as you provide that, I think that keeps everything kind of even keel in the locker room. But if it's guy, he messes up, and you never get on him or you keep letting it slide, not only coaches see the other players see that like, oh, man, what's up with that? You know what I'm saying? Because players want to win. A lot of times you see a guy getting away with that, then you might not think he's taking it as serious. But if that costs you a game or two, you'd be like, man, if we would have won those other 2 games, we might be in a better situation. So I think the key thing is you've got to be consistent.
Yeah, so I mean, one of the other things when we talk about setting the culture in the locker room, especially this year, is we're kind of looking at like, who are the young players that are going to kind of, or that have been those younger players that are now kind of getting into that part of their careers where they're looking to be leaders on the team. When did that transition kind of occur for you in your career? And was it like a, snap light bulb moment, like, oh, I'm kind of the vet now, or was it kind of this gradual transition?
I think it was gradual, and even though I became one of the leaders, for me, Dan was always a leader of the offense. So I think probably my fourth, somewhere around there, 4 years, something like that. Guys would look up to me because you've been consistently playing at a high level, and people respect you. And long as you consistent with people, and I had forgot about this, but I was, we had the little rookie things and stuff, and the guy told a story. I just forgot about it, but he said, I came to him and said, hey man, when we would do 2-a-days, the rookies would have to go get a stack of towels and hand it out to all the linemen, this and that, and blah, blah, blah. And I told him, I said, hey man, you got to at least just do it, one time, this and that. And he did it. But what I did, and I did it, but I just forgot I did it till I heard him telling the story. And he was like, for the evening practice, instead of him going and get the towels, I went and got the towels and handed them out to everybody. So it gave them a different respect, because it's like, this guy don't have to do that. But I just remember, for me, I remember how they was rough on me and Keith as rookies. And I said, I'm cool with you because I'm going to respect you as a man, but I don't want to be like, man, this guy's an asshole. He ain't got to treat us like that. You know what I'm saying? So I would do some of the things that they wouldn't expect me to do. And so that's why I always kind of got along with the guys. And they know if I said something to them, it was out of love. It wasn't just me just picking on them or whatever. So, but I think sometimes you do things and you forget about it, and you start listening to these old stories. And then I had to really think. I was like, I guess I did do that, but I wasn't thinking about it at the time to remember to say, oh, I did that, because I wasn't doing it for that reason. So, but it was pretty cool that the guy looked at me in a different light for doing that, because I really didn't have to do it. But I just remember me being a rookie, and that always stuck with me.
Sam, you're muted.
There we go. Can you guys hear me now?
Yep.
So, Richmond, and we'll conclude on this. If you were brought into the Dolphins locker room today to be a mentor to the offensive line, or just overall as a mentor for this Dolphins team in this upcoming season about building culture, having that communication, respecting each other's position, what would be the pep talk you would give that locker room?
For me, I would tell them, don't pay attention to the media or social media. I mean, they got a lot more to deal with than I had to then. But a lot of time I wouldn't even read the paper because it didn't really matter. I just need to focus on if we had it, like we got to play these games. A lot of times you'll play well and lose a game. And a lot of times you'll play bad and win a game. But it's like, you correct the mistakes. But I'm like, man, as long as we kind of unify and keep everything in house and stay focused and just take it one game at a time. Don't be listening to, a lot of time in the media be like, oh, if they should win these games here, they should win these. No, you got to go out. If we playing Buffalo this week, let's worry about Buffalo. If it's Kansas City the next, if it's the 49, just take it one game at a time, but don't start trying to group them and say, oh yeah, we should be able to win these next three. We got them at home, this and that. That's a trap. And just trying to remain focused. And I tell people all the time, it's too much media coverage for me. I'm glad I played in the 90s when I played because it could be a distraction. And every little thing you do, people see is just whether you want to see it or not. But I like the 90s. It was coverage, but it's gotten more and more. You're up under a microscope. So, but I would tell them, don't read the papers. They got a job to do, the opinions and stuff like that, but don't get caught up in that because a lot of times that will have you feeling a certain way. And reporters, they got a job to do this and that. And it was tough answering questions sometime after a loss because sometimes they would ask you a question that they already got the answer to, but then it's phrased in a way to piss you off, but then you got to remain calm because you're sitting up here thinking about, we just lost the game. And they're like, what happened out there? And you'd be like, you already know what happened out there. We lost. But you can't answer the question that way. You know what I'm saying? You gotta politically be correct. And so but it teaches you to not let control your emotions. And I think that's the biggest thing. But you get to reading the paper and stuff like that. A lot of time it can get negative and you don't need to buy in all that. So those are some of the things I would tell them to just don't even worry about it. Don't focus on that. Focus on your assignments, what you got to do, and the team you got to play next.
Richmond, this has been incredible, and thank you for breaking it down like the only true Hall of Famer lineman can. We'll definitely try to get you back once the season goes, maybe get some tape breakdowns in there as well. And guys, make sure you stick with us here on Scouting the Fins, part of the 3 Yards Per Carry podcast and on the 5 Reasons Sports Network. As always, y'all, go Fins.
Go Fins.